The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council had never seen anything like this before. Emergency lights bathed the massive chamber in deep red as warning sirens wailed through corridors that stretched for miles. Admiral Li Huan sat perfectly, still in his small human chair, watching alien dignitaries panic around him like frightened children. The holographic display at the center of the chamber told a story of absolute terror. 17 star systems, gone. Not destroyed, not conquered, but completely devoured. Every planet, every moon, every space station had been consumed by something that defied all understanding. The Void Devourers had arrived. Li Huan studied the tactical readouts with the calm expression of a man who had seen war before. Around him, representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations were losing their minds. The tall, blue-skinned Nexari ambassador was shaking so badly his translator couldn't keep up with his rapid speech. "The quantum matrices are useless," Ambassador Veltar screamed, his 6 tentacles writhing in panic. "Our destroyers hit them with enough energy to crack moons, and they just absorbed it all. The Nexari Empire formally withdraws every military asset. We're evacuating our core." "Worlds immediately!" The announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Nexari Empire commanded fleets that could sterilize entire sectors of space. Their quantum destroyers were legendary, ships that could fold reality itself into weapon form. If they were retreating, what hope did anyone else have? One by one, the dominoes began to fall. The Etherian High Consul, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline body, dimmed visibly as she spoke. "The Etherian Collective acknowledges defeat. Our star ignition protocols have failed. We detected no energy signatures that our weapons could exploit. We are returning to our protected dimensions." Li Huan raised an eyebrow. "The Etherians could literally make stars explode by thinking about it. They existed partially outside normal reality, which made them nearly impossible to attack. Even they were running scared." The massive architect delegate, more machine than organic life, processed data streams for several long minutes before speaking in its grinding mechanical voice. "Computational analysis complete. Victory probability. Against Void Devourers, 0.001%. The Architect Collective is withdrawing to defensive positions around our factory worlds. Our moon-sized battle stations have proven ineffective." This was getting ridiculous. The architects built weapons the size of planets. Their factory worlds pumped out warships like other species made breakfast. They had turned entire solar systems into fortress complexes that could hold off invasions for centuries. The Chronarch representative was the worst of all. These beings could see through time itself, peek into possible futures, even rewind small sections of reality when things got too dangerous. The ancient creature's many eyes were wide with terror as it spoke in whispers. "We have looked into 10,000 possible timelines. In every single one, the Devourers consume everything. Every strategy fails. Every weapon proves useless. Every civilization falls. The future is darkness." Li Huan had heard enough. He activated his translator device and slowly stood up. At just under 6 feet tall, he was tiny compared to most of the alien representatives. His simple grey uniform looked plain next to their exotic armor and energy fields. But when he spoke, his voice carried across the entire chamber. "The human delegation requests all available tactical data on Devourer movement patterns, weapon signatures, and consumption protocols." The chamber fell dead silent. 1,000 alien eyes turned to stare at the small human figure. You could have heard a pin drop in the massive space. Ambassador Veltar was the first to recover from shock. "Admiral Li, with all due respect, your species has barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Your weapons are primitive fusion drives and kinetic projectiles. These entities have consumed civilizations that could reshape reality itself." Li Huan looked around the chamber at all the terrified faces. Species that could bend space and time, manipulate matter at the atomic level, exist as pure thought, all of them paralyzed by fear. He couldn't help but smile a little. "Then I guess we'll have to be creative." The Altarian observer, a peaceful species known for their wisdom, leaned forward desperately. "Admiral, you don't understand. These aren't ships or weapons that can be fought with conventional tactics. There's something else entirely. They consume matter and convert it directly into dark energy. They're growing stronger with every system they devour. How do they move? Li Huan asked calmly. What? The Altarian blinked in confusion. How do they travel between systems? Do they use hyperspace? Wormholes? Dimensional folding? They appear to phase between normal space and some kind of void dimension, but what's their energy absorption rate? Do they have any kind of processing delay when converting matter? The alien representatives exchanged confused glances. These seemed like such basic questions, the kind of things military academies taught in first-year courses. But somehow, in all their panic about impossible enemies and hopeless odds, none of the advanced civilizations had bothered to ask them. As the great powers of the galaxy announced their retreat plans and began evacuating their core worlds, 3 humans remained. In the emptying chamber, Admiral Li Huan, Captain Kim Soo-min, and Commander Park Jong-soo sat calmly at their small station, downloading terabytes of sensor data, battle recordings, and tactical analyses. The galaxy was preparing for extinction. Humanity was preparing for war. Captain Park Min-ho stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, his hands gripping the metal railing as he watched something that should have been impossible. Through the reinforced viewport, 12 massive shapes moved through space like living nightmares. Each void devourer was the size of a small moon, their black surfaces rippling with energy that seemed to bend light itself. The tactical display showed the systematic destruction of Proxima Centauri. The devourers weren't just attacking, they were feeding. Planets disappeared chunk by chunk, their matter being converted into streams of dark energy that flowed into the creatures' cores. It was like watching cosmic sharks tear apart a school of fish. "Contact in 30 minutes, announced Navigation Officer Lee So-young, her voice steady despite the impossible odds they faced. "All ships report ready for engagement." Park Min-ho looked at the fleet roster on his secondary screen. 200 ships. That was it. The entire human response to a threat that had sent million-ship armadas running for cover. Frigates, destroyers, a handful of cruisers, and even some converted cargo haulers that had been hastily fitted with weapons. Against 12 moon-sized entities that ate matter for breakfast. The comm system crackled to life with Admiral Li Huan's voice. "All ships, this is Admiral Li. I know what you're all thinking. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and probably out of our minds. But remember, we're not here to win pretty. We're here to buy time and learn how these things work." Park Min-ho smiled grimly. That was Li Huan for you. Always focused on the mission, even when the mission seemed suicidal. The Admiral had spent 3 days poring over every piece of data the retreating alien civilizations had left behind. While they saw unstoppable monsters, he saw puzzles that needed solving. "Look at their movement patterns," Park Min-ho called out to his tactical team. "They're not random. There's a sequence to how they consume matter." Lieutenant Kim Dae-ho, barely 25 and fresh from the academy, pulled up the sensor readings on his console. "You're right, sir. They always start with the smallest celestial bodies first. Moons, asteroids, space stations, then they work their way up to planets. And watch how they coordinate," added Commander Yoon Hee-jin from the weapons station. "They maintain exact spacing between each other. It's like they're following some kind of protocol." This was exactly what the alien civilizations had missed. They'd been so terrified by the Devourer's power that they'd never stopped to study their behavior. The Nexari had thrown their quantum destroyers at them like hammers against a wall. The Etherians had tried to overpower them with raw energy. The architects had built bigger and bigger weapons, thinking size was the answer. But humans had learned something different during their short but violent history. Sometimes the key to winning wasn't having the biggest gun, it was understanding your enemy better than they understood themselves. The comm system buzzed with an incoming transmission. "Sir, message from the Etherian monitoring station," reported Lieutenant Kim Dae-ho. "They're asking if we've reconsidered our decision to engage." Park Min-ho could imagine the conversation happening on that distant observation post. Advanced. Beings who existed partially outside normal reality, watching primitive humans prepare to charge into certain death. They probably thought humanity had lost its collective mind. He keyed his microphone. "Tell them we're just getting started. The First wave of human ships began their acceleration toward the Devourer formation. No elegant energy weapons or reality-bending technology, just fusion drives pushing metal hulls toward the enemy at maximum burn. Nuclear warheads armed and ready, railguns loaded with depleted uranium slugs, the kind of crude, violent weapons that civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. But there was something else powering those ships, something that all the advanced technology in the galaxy couldn't replicate. It was the same thing that had driven humans to climb mountains just because they were there, to sail across unknown oceans in wooden boats, to strap themselves to controlled explosions and ride them into space. Pure, stubborn, absolutely insane courage. Devourer Alpha is changing course, reported Kim Dae-ho, his voice tight with excitement. It's moving to intercept our lead squadron. Good, Park Min-ho replied. That means it sees us as a threat. Behind them, something incredible was happening. While the galaxy's great powers retreated to their fortress worlds and calculated their chances of survival, Earth's industrial capacity had gone into overdrive. Shipyards that had been building cargo haulers were now pumping out warships. Civilian vessels were being retrofitted with weapons. Mining platforms were being converted into mobile weapons platforms. Every day brought new reinforcements. Yesterday, it had been 50 ships. Today, it was 80. Tomorrow, it would be 100. The ships weren't pretty. Most of them looked like they'd been built in someone's garage, but they kept coming. Commander Yoon Hee-jin was monitoring the production reports from Earth. Sir, the lunar shipyards are reporting completion of another squadron. Estimated arrival time 18 hours. What about the Mars facilities? Park Min-ho asked. They've converted 3 ore processing stations into mobile weapons platforms. They're calling them flying fortresses, but honestly, they look more like flying scrap heaps with really big guns. That was humanity in a nutshell. They didn't have the technology to build elegant weapons, so they built ugly ones that worked. They couldn't manipulate matter at the quantum level, so they just used more matter. They couldn't bend reality, so they crashed into it headfirst and hoped for the best. The Devourers had consumed 17 star systems by being methodical, efficient, and completely unstoppable. They'd never encountered an enemy that responded to overwhelming force by building more ships faster than they could be destroyed. They were about to learn something that every species in human history had eventually discovered. Never underestimate the power of someone who's too stupid to know when they're beaten. Commander Yoon Soo-jin felt the soul's pride shake violently as another piece of debris slammed into their hull. The space around Proxima Centauri had become a graveyard of twisted metal and floating wreckage. What had once been humanity's proud outer defense line was now a field of broken dreams and shattered ships. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Chief Engineer Park Dong-wook, his voice crackling through the intercom. Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we've lost life support to that section. Soo-jin tightened her grip on the acceleration harness as the ship lurched through another debris cloud. Through the bridge viewport, she could see the massive form of Devourer Alpha 7 moving slowly through space like a wounded whale. The creature's black surface was scarred and pitted from the previous attack, the first real damage any human weapon had managed to inflict. Target acquired, called out Ensign Choi Min-ho from the tactical station. His young face was pale but determined. Devourer designation Alpha 7 bearing 27 Mark IV. The ram attack from the Busan Fury left a significant hull breach on its lower section. Soo-jin studied the tactical display. The Busan Fury had been a cargo hauler converted into a makeshift warship. When conventional weapons failed to penetrate the Devourer's adaptive armor, Captain Nam Jae-hyun had made a decision that redefined human warfare. He'd loaded his ship with every explosive they could find and rammed it straight into the creature's core. The explosion had been visible from 3 star systems away. The Busan Fury was gone, along with its crew of 63 volunteers. But for the first time since the war began, a Devourer had been hurt. All power to engines, Soo-jin ordered. Route everything: life support, artificial gravity, weapons, systems. I want every erg of energy pushing us forward. The Pride's fusion reactor screamed in protest as power flowed through systems never designed to handle such loads. The bridge lights dimmed to emergency levels. The artificial gravity flickered and died, leaving the crew floating in their harnesses. But the ship's acceleration increased dramatically. Behind them, two more human vessels, the Incheon Hammer and the Gwangju Spear, matched their trajectory. All three ships were moving at velocities that would normally be considered insane. Their hulls glowed red-hot from atmospheric friction as they dove toward the wounded devourer. Distance to target, 15,000 kilometers and closing fast, reported Navigation Officer Kim Hae-jin. Impact in 90 seconds. Soo-jin opened the ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the commander. In less than 2 minutes, we're going to hit that thing harder than anything has ever been hit before. I want you to know that every one of you volunteered for this mission. Every one of you knew the odds. And every one of you is about to become part of something that will be remembered until the stars burn out. She paused, watching her crew work with calm efficiency despite knowing they were flying toward certain death. These weren't superhuman warriors or genetically enhanced soldiers. They were ordinary people, engineers, technicians, kids fresh out of training academy, who had decided that some things were worth dying for. The galaxy thinks we're crazy, she continued. They think we don't understand mathematics or probability or the concept of overwhelming force. They're wrong, we understand perfectly, we just don't care. 10,000 kilometers. The Devourer's surface filled their entire viewport now, a landscape of alien metal and energy conduits that pulsed with malevolent life. Point defense systems emerged from hidden ports, firing streams of coherent energy that could vaporize mountains. The Incheon Hammer took a direct hit and exploded in a brilliant flash. The Gwangju Spear's port engine failed, sending the ship spinning out of control. But the Soul's Pride flew on, threading through the defensive fire like a needle through a hurricane. 5,000 kilometers. Soo-jin could see individual details on the Devourer's surface now. The wound left by the Busan Fury's sacrifice, the energy flows that fed its massive consumption organs, the geometric patterns that covered its hull like a technological disease. Proximity. Sensors are going crazy, reported Choi Min-ho. The Devourer is trying to adapt its defenses to our approach vector. Too late, Soo-jin replied. We're already inside its reaction envelope. 1,000 kilometers. The Pride's hull began to buckle under the gravitational stress emanating from the Devourer's core. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The ship's computer systems flickered and died, but the engines kept burning, pushing them forward on pure momentum now. In the final seconds before impact, Soo-jin's last thought was of her daughter back on Earth. A little girl who would grow up in a universe where humanity had proved that courage could triumph over impossible odds. The Soul's Pride hit the Devourer at 17% of light speed. The explosion tore a hole in space itself. Energy cascaded across dimensional barriers, creating aurora effects that were visible from neighboring star systems. The wounded Devourer convulsed, its consumption organs disrupted, its adaptive systems overloaded by the raw kinetic energy of human determination. Across the galaxy, alien observers watched in stunned silence. The Etherian monitoring station recorded energy readings that broke their instruments. The Chronarch temporal scanners detected probability fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible. Impossible, whispered Chronarch observer Zixtal to his aide. They lost 3 ships and somehow disabled an entire Devourer. The mathematics don't support this level of effectiveness. But the mathematics were changing. Every human ship that died transmitted its final sensor readings back to Earth. Every failed attack provided data for the next wave. Every sacrifice taught humanity something new about how to hurt these seemingly invincible enemies. What the alien civilizations couldn't understand was that humans had been perfecting this type of warfare for millennia. They called it evolution. Through extinction, the process of learning faster than your enemies could kill you, the Devourers had consumed 17 star systems by being methodical and efficient. They had never encountered an enemy that treated warfare like a learning laboratory, where every death was a lesson and every failure was just another step toward victory. They were about to discover that the most dangerous enemy in the universe wasn't the one with the biggest weapons or the most advanced technology. It was the one that refused to stop adapting, no matter how many times they were beaten down. Admiral Li Huan stood in what had once been the pride of human space infrastructure. Lunar Base's command center now looked like it had been through a war zone, which technically it had. Broken consoles sparked intermittently, their screens flickering between tactical displays and error messages. The main holographic projector still worked, casting ghostly blue light across the faces of his exhausted staff. The numbers floating in the air told a story that would have broken any other species. 3 billion humans dead in 6 months of fighting, 47 colonies completely evacuated, their populations fleeing toward Earth like refugees from an unstoppable plague. The Outer Rim territories gone, the middle colonies abandoned. Even the inner systems were preparing for evacuation. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Vega Defense Fleet," reported Major Song Hee-young, her voice completely drained of emotion. She'd been delivering casualty reports for so long that the horror had worn away, leaving only hollow professionalism. Last transmission was 17 hours ago. Estimated survivors, 0. Li Huan nodded without turning from the shattered viewport. Through the reinforced glass, he could see something that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Earth's tight surface was glowing, not from cities or auroras, but from the light of industrial production, pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Every orbital factory was working 24 hours a day. Every shipyard was pumping out vessels as fast as raw materials could be delivered. The planet's entire surface had been converted into a massive war machine, with factories stretching from pole to pole and mining operations that had carved new canyons into the landscape. Children who should have been in school were working assembly lines. Elderly people who should have been retired were operating fusion welders. Artists, teachers, musicians, everyone had become part of the war effort. Not because they wanted to, but because there was literally no other choice. "How many ships lost this week?" Li asked quietly. Major Song checked her tablet. 237 confirmed destroyed. 18 more listed as missing. Presumed lost. "We've managed to build 183 new vessels in the same period. The mathematics were brutal but simple. Humanity was losing ships faster than they could build them. At this rate, they'd run out of people to crew vessels before they ran out of materials to build them with." "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Captain Nam Wubin entered the command center, his uniform still scorched from atmospheric re-entry. His face was streaked with soot and exhaustion, but his eyes held something that had become rare in recent months: excitement. "The captured Devourer technology from Sector 7, Nam continued, trying to catch his breath. "Our engineering teams think they've finally cracked part of their adaptive algorithm." Li turned from the window, and suddenly every person in the command center was looking up from their stations. For months they'd been throwing human lives and human ships at an enemy that seemed completely invulnerable. The idea that they might have learned something useful was like hearing about water in a desert. "Show me," Li said simply. The main holographic display flickered and changed, showing technical schematics that hurt to look at. The designs were a bizarre fusion of human engineering and alien technology, like someone had tried to mate a fusion reactor with a nightmare and somehow made it work. "We managed to salvage this from the wreckage of Devourer Beta 3, Nam explained, highlighting different sections of the schematic. "The one that Commander Park's squadron disabled near Jupiter. Our materials scientists have been studying its adaptive hull plating for weeks." The display zoomed in on microscopic details. The Devourer's hull wasn't just armor. It was a living system that could adapt to different types of attacks in real time. Kinetic weapons would be met with energy-absorbing surfaces. Energy weapons would trigger the formation of reflective barriers. It was like fighting an enemy that could evolve during battle. "But here's the interesting part," Nam continued. "The adaptive system has processing limits. It can't change fast enough to counter multiple attack types simultaneously. And we think we've figured out how to integrate some of their technology with our fusion drives." The schematic shifted to show a human destroyer with Devourer technology grafted onto its hull. It looked crude, dangerous, and completely insane, the kind of thing that would either revolutionize space warfare or kill everyone who tried to use it. "How long to retrofit the fleet?" Li asked. 6 weeks for the first squadron, Nam replied. But, sir, the casualty projections for test pilots are irrelevant, Lee finished. We're already dead if we don't try this. Around the command center, his staff was staring at the schematics with expressions ranging from hope to terror. The hybrid technology represented everything humanity had learned about their enemy, paid for with billions of lives and hundreds of star systems. Major Song pulled up production estimates on her console. If we convert the Mars shipyards entirely to hybrid production, we could have 50 experimental vessels ready for testing in 2 months. Do it, Lee ordered. And I want volunteer crews only. Anyone with family gets priority for the safe assignments. Sir, interrupted Communications Officer Kim Tae-jun, we're getting reports from our monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The alien civilizations are picking up devourer wreckage in multiple systems. Lee raised an eyebrow. Wreckage? Yes, sir. Actual debris from destroyed devourers. The Etherian monitoring posts are calling it impossible. The Chronarch Time Seers are reporting probability fluctuations they've never seen before. For the first time in months, Li Huan allowed himself a small smile. Across the galaxy, the great civilizations that had fled in terror were starting to notice something unprecedented. The unstoppable force that had consumed 17 star systems was beginning to take damage. Not much damage. Humanity was still losing catastrophically by any reasonable measure. But for the first time since the war began, the devourers were bleeding. The whispers were already starting in the diplomatic channels. Ancient species that had written off humanity as a noble but doomed gesture were beginning to ask questions. What if the primitive humans had actually learned something during their suicidal attacks? What if their willingness to sacrifice everything had taught them secrets that more advanced civilizations had missed? The mathematics of the war were still brutal. Humanity was still dying. But for the first time, the numbers were changing in their favor. Slowly, expensively, purchased with the lives of entire generations, but changing nonetheless. Colonel Shin Yun-ji had never flown anything like this before. Her hybrid fighter felt alive beneath her hands, responding to her thoughts almost before she had them. The cockpit hummed with alien technology that had been grafted onto human engineering in ways that should have been impossible. Every surface glowed with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The craft wasn't just a machine. It was a partnership between human creativity and devourer adaptive systems. The hull could shift its molecular structure mid-flight, becoming harder than diamond when taking hits or flowing like liquid when she needed maximum speed. The weapons systems learned from each shot fired, adjusting their energy signatures to penetrate enemy defenses more effectively. "Phoenix Squadron, form up on me," Yun-ji transmitted across the tactical network. Around her in the darkness of space, 99 other impossible craft responded to her call. Each one was unique, a fusion of human desperation and alien technology that represented everything humanity had learned from a year of bloody warfare. These weren't the sleek, elegant fighters that other civilizations preferred. They looked like they'd been built in someone's garage by people who had more courage than sense, which technically they had been. But they worked in ways that defied every rule of conventional space combat. "Let's show these things what we've learned," Yun-ji continued, diving toward the Devourer formation below. The enemy had changed too. The original 12 Devourers had been joined by dozens more, creating a swarm that stretched across the entire solar system. But humanity's relentless attacks had forced them to adapt in ways they'd never needed to before. Their hulls were scarred, with battle damage. Their consumption patterns had become erratic as they diverted energy to defensive systems. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers were fighting a war instead of simply feeding. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Lieutenant Park Min-jun from her wingman position. "Enemy point defenses are powering up." Yun-ji smiled grimly. The Devourer's defensive systems had been designed to handle the elegant, predictable attacks of advanced civilizations. They weren't prepared for human-style combat, which basically consisted of hitting things harder and faster than anyone thought possible. "Remember your training," she broadcast to the squadron. "Don't try to be heroes. Just be human." The hybrid fighters dove into the Devourer formation like a swarm of mechanical wasps. Their adaptive hulls shifted constantly, confusing enemy targeting systems. Their weapons fired in seemingly random patterns that actually followed mathematical sequences designed to overload alien defensive algorithms. But as impressive as the human fighters were, they were still vastly outnumbered. Even with their new technology, Phoenix Squadron was just 100 ships against an enemy force that could consume entire star systems. Then something incredible happened. "This is Etherian battle sage Morden," came a transmission that made Yunji's heart skip a beat. "Phoenix Squadron, you have energy support." Pillars of stellar fire erupted around the Devourer formation. The Etherians had returned to battle, their energy manipulation abilities now coordinated with human tactical data. They weren't just throwing raw power at the enemy anymore. They were using precision strikes guided by human intelligence. "Architect, battle platform Zenth requesting targeting coordinates," came another voice. "Our reality shapers are online and ready for synchronized assault." Through her fighter's canopy, Yunji could see the massive Architect world ships emerging from hyperspace, moon-sized vessels that could reshape matter at the atomic level. But instead of the clumsy, overwhelming attacks they'd tried before, they were now following human tactical plans that focused on precision over raw power. One by one, the galaxy's great civilizations were returning to the fight. Not because they'd suddenly become brave, but because humanity had taught them something. That changed everything. The secret wasn't having better weapons or more advanced technology. The secret was refusing to give up when everything seemed hopeless. "All ships, this is Admiral Lee," came the familiar voice over the command frequency. From her position in the battle, Yunji could see the human command ship, a converted cargo hauler that looked like it had been through a dozen wars, which it had. "For everyone who fell getting us here," Lee continued, his voice carrying across every ship in the growing fleet. "For everyone still standing. For the future we're going to build together." The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment the galaxy learned to fight like humans, not with elegant weapons or overwhelming force, but with the kind of stubborn determination that refused to acknowledge defeat. Devourer after devourer fell to the combined assault. Their adaptive systems, designed to counter single types of attacks, couldn't handle the chaotic mix of human tactics, Etherian energy manipulation, and Architect reality shaping. What had once seemed unstoppable was being torn apart by a coalition that fought with human heart and alien technology. The last Devourer died in a cascade of exotic matter and dimensional energy that lit up the entire system. Its death scream echoed across hyperspace, a sound that would haunt the nightmares of any species that had ever encountered these creatures. 6 months later, Commander Park So-hyun stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers, watching history being made. Representatives from across the galaxy were signing the new Mutual Defense Accords, a treaty that would ensure no species would ever have to face extinction alone again. The chamber looked different now. Instead of the hierarchical seating arrangement that had separated species by their technological advancement, the new layout placed everyone on equal footing. The humans sat next to beings who could manipulate time and reality, treated not as primitives but as equals who had proven their worth in the crucible of war. "The humans have given us all a gift," declared the Etherian ambassador, her crystalline form glowing with sincere emotion. "They've reminded us what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves." The Architect delegate, its mechanical voice unusually warm, added, "We built weapons that could destroy planets, but we forgot how to build hope. Humanity showed us that courage is the greatest technology of all." Even the Chronarch observer, ancient beyond measure, spoke with something approaching awe. "In all our visions of possible futures, we never saw this timeline. A species so young teaching wisdom to civilizations older than their star. It should have been impossible." Park So-hyun smiled as she looked out through the chamber's transparent dome at the stars beyond. Ships from a dozen civilizations patrolled the space around the council station, not as separate fleets, but as a unified force committed to protecting the galaxy they all shared. Humanity had started the war with primitive weapons and desperate courage. They'd ended it by teaching the galaxy that sometimes the most advanced response to impossible odds was the simple decision to stand and fight anyway. The Void Devourers were gone, but their legacy lived on in the bonds forged between species that had learned to fight like humans, with everything they had, for everything that mattered. The galaxy was safe, and it had learned the most important lesson humanity had to offer, that true strength wasn't about what you could destroy, but about what you were willing to protect. The end